How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great discussion coming our way. What happens when a supervisor asks you to deviate from policy? This was a question sent our way through an email. So I promised the person that we would do a quick episode on this. I believe we covered it before, but I can't find the video. My partner with today's discussion is going to be Russ Hamilton. He'll be on shortly. And again, the topic is, what should you do if you are directed to deviate from policy? Guys, the show is sponsored by three entities. We have American Military University. Guys, if you're looking to go to college, get that degree, maybe bring some experience into the classroom, check out American Military University. They have been supportive of me since day one, more importantly, supportive of the corrections profession. We also have Guardian RFID. From inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. Guys, also check out their YouTube channel. I do post up videos for them every week. And we also have the WRAP. Now, if you guys don't know what the WRAP is, that's WRAP. There's a link to a video of that in my description. Controlling combative subjects quickly in an upright position so they can breathe has never been more important. Departments such as Washington, D.C., L.A. County, San Diego County, and hundreds of other facilities across the U.S. trust and believe in the WRAP restraint. Go to saferestraints.com for contact information and mention Tier Talk to receive instructor training at no cost. Lower liability for your facility and your personnel with the WRAP. Give the WRAP a call today, 800-WRAP-911. All right, there we go. What's up, Russ? How you been?
Anthony, how are you doing?
Good, man. Hey, by the way, guys, one last thing. I do have the book Inmate Manipulation on the market. I have a link to that in the description as well. Be a good Christmas gift. I know I would read it if I got it for Christmas. Hey, Russ, you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Not at all, Anthony. My name's Russ Hamilton. Got basically 30-some years or so, messing around in corrections. Started at San Quentin back in 89. I've also worked in juvenile detention facilities. And right now I work in rehabilitation and reentry programs for a private contractor. Here I am.
Right now, I want to mention something. The title here is, what should you do if you are directed to deviate from policy? I want people to realize that this could happen. There could be times where policy just isn't enough, and the supervisor is going to have to employ some discretion. So this dialogue is going to be an objective dialogue, but sometimes when a supervisor asks you or directs you to deviate from policy, you better be careful when you turn that down, because the supervisor may be able to justify it, again, if there's a reason for it. And again, that's within their discretion. But Russ, real quick, Russ, when it comes to policy, Russ, you've been a supervisor before. Do supervisors have any discretion with institutional policies?
Well, yeah, they certainly do. Policies attempt to try and address every possible scenario sometimes, but you know what? That's simply an impossible task. Deviating from policy really is not that big of a problem unless you're going to start doing really strange, silly things with it, where you start, violating law, where you start violating, case law, where you start going against, any type of law. And especially if we get into those hairy situations where you could end up violating the Constitution, especially with regard to the Fourth and Eighth Amendments. So, and the Fifth Amendment too, as well. So you just have to be really careful about that. Because policy can't foresee everything, is there a time where you might have to violate it in order to ensure the public safety, in order to ensure the safety of staff, in order to ensure the safety of inmates? Sure. But you better be able to justify it. And if you're the one being told to do it, you better be sure that your supervisor understands what he's doing. And you better be able to justify in your mind that you're not violating any laws, and that you're not violating especially those Constitution liberty interests that are, enshrined in the Constitution.
Now, Russ, I just want to make sure we have it clear. I'm not going to say violate and deviate are interchangeable, right? Would there be a difference? Because I know you mentioned the word violate. Is there a difference between violate and deviate?
I think that you could say that there is. I'm kind of using them somewhat interchangeably, but I deviate might be a less of a standard where you're just kind of, swerving away from the center of the road instead of trying to stay right down the middle.
Yeah, what I was kind of trying to get at is that I think like when it comes to like deviate, the reason why I was kind of using that, but I think we're on the same page here, Russ, is that there's always going to be an effort to bring things back to policy and procedure, but obviously there are certain times that things are not covered. So a supervisor that's going to make that call better understand where they need to go. So, if they have no idea where they need to go, then they're not going to be able to justify what it is that they did when they deviated from policy, or in that case, violated policy. So again, as a supervisor, you're right. You have discretion. You're able to employ that discretion, but you better be able to justify what it is that you were trying to accomplish. Would you agree with that, Russ?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Justification is going to be everything. The ability to point out in specific detail why you took the actions that you did, or why there were actions that you didn't take, is going to, play into just how much trouble that you're in. Or quite possibly, it might even be the fact that, hey, because you did take different actions, or because you avoided certain actions, maybe you're the hero of the moment. It just all depends.
Yeah, and guys, as Russ is saying, you really got to know policies and procedures, because you're going to have to justify it anytime you venture off as to why you had to do it. But the cool thing is, guys, if policies and procedures didn't have leeway, or the supervisors didn't have discretion, we would never evolve. Most of the evolution behind corrections, the practices in the prisons and jails, is because someone said, hey, this isn't working. We got to do it this way. But then when they went to go explain why it wasn't working, they explained from the standpoint of, hey, this is the policy that was there, and these are the reasons why it couldn't work. And the next thing you know, we create memos, and then eventually the memos are implemented in policy. Would you agree, Russ? That's kind of usually how it works?
Yeah, it depends. I guess you would say, fortunately or unfortunately, policy and procedure evolve or devolve from the last, best, worst mistake that somebody made.
Right. And guys, so now with all that said, I think right off the bat, we're letting the people know on the receiving end of what could be a supervisor directing you to deviate from policy, or perspective. Maybe they're trying to get you to deviate, but you see violate. So I love the fact that we use these two words, because it's funny. We use deviate. See, as a supervisor, if I was trying to convince somebody to kind of go a little away from policy in an effort to bring things back in, I would use the word deviate. But if they didn't want to do it, they would probably use the word violate. I just want to make sure we're aware of that. It's kind of a little change in words, but it's true. If I'm making an effort to push somebody to do something, I'm going to use the word deviate if it's not covered in policy, but I have to get it done. But the person not wanting to do it may say, you're asking for me to violate policy. It's like, whoa, hold on. So again, I like the fact that it could be just an interchange. But at the end, it really is about, kind of maneuvering a little bit to bring things back to where it needs to be. Now, if you're on the receiving end of that, look what we just did right now, me and Russ. Look what we just did. We explained to you that, yes, supervisors have discretion. And yes, if they have to do something that the policy doesn't cover, they can give you the order, as long as the order isn't unethical. And guys, if a supervisor is asking you to deviate from policy, as long as it's not unethical, you may have to really think before you refuse it, right, Russ?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to point everything back to things like, law, case law, state law, federal law, and all of those, laws that we do have to follow, and especially to anything to do with the Constitution and anything to do with liberty interests, because those are the big things where we can get in huge trouble over. Those things, however, are not necessarily things that we follow every day as far as when we're looking at just policy. So if you can take those, and if you have a pretty good knowledge of them, you might be able to wade through this thing with your supervisor without doing something on the silly side that puts you in a cross for being insubordinate, or something like that.
Yeah, I think the big concern right now is you're going to see a lot of deviation from policy because we're working at understaffed facilities. So I'm sure right now, to try to keep the facilities up and operational, they are making a lot of adjustments right now, but they're probably not changing policy. These are just probably, hey, for today we got to do this, and then today becomes the norm, and then eventually you're running on an understaffed, operations. But with that said, if you are on the receiving end, so first thing, if a supervisor comes up, let's break it down a few parts, and this will be a quick dialogue. But supervisor comes up, and again, there's going to be differences. I mean, there's going to be emergent situations, or there's just going to be maybe something that has to be done, not so emergent, maybe urgent, but not so emergent. But either way, I will tell you one thing: if it's emergent and shit's happening on the fly, if you're not asked to do anything unethical, you could always document it later on. But when it's emergent, man, you don't really have time to ask a lot of questions. You're gonna have to trust in the supervisor's ability to see things that you cannot see, because again, maybe their perspective, their experience, because at any moment your delay could cause something to just get a lot worse. Remember, I learned this too. Working in corrections and jails, our issues that we face every day, they're not complicated issues. They're complex issues, which means that they evolve and they get worse if you don't act on it immediately. So when you have a supervisor that's able to see things more clearly, and they may have to say, you know what, based on their experience, we're going to have to go this way in order for us to get back this way. You may not say, well, hey, policy said, not now. Not now, because at the time right now, I'm a supervisor, guys. It's nothing unethical here, but I'm going to have to employ some discretion because policy is not spelling this out. So, Russ, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. There are times, there are situations that we can end up in where policy might unnecessarily burden us. It might unnecessarily slow us down. And I think, though, that's the position, that's the thing where you really have to have it set in your mind, the difference between policy, the difference between law, the difference between, something that might, jeopardize someone's constitutional or liberty rights, and those things that are just stopgap measures that someone maybe wrote a long time ago and with good intent, but somehow they impinge on the safety and security, especially of the public. Have to be careful of those things.
Right. Now, remember, after you go through it, as long as someone's not asking you to do something unethical, like based on what Russ said above, you can always go back when the situation's calm, and during the debrief, you can ask whatever questions you need. And I'm sure the supervisor should be able to explain and justify where those decisions come from. But remember, guys, as we move up, we start to see things that the front line may not always see. So when we start making a decision, the higher you move up, it's more of decisions that are very forward thinking. We're trying to avoid ripple effects, things that we see in the bigger picture. But trust me, guys, if you want to learn, that's great. But there's going to be a time and place. But the last thing you want to do is question something during an emergency situation that can prevent us from moving forward. Again, I'm not talking about anything unethical. I'm talking about slight deviations to bring things back to where it needs to be. So with that said, we'll just talk about the regular times. Maybe something urgent, but not something emergent. And what I'm thinking of right now, Russ, I keep on thinking of understaffing. I know that I'm sure right now we're definitely doing some deviation of policies because, again, we don't have the proper staffing. So for an example, Russ, let's say you're in a unit right now. You're supposed to have 2 people, and the sergeant comes up to you and says, hey, today this unit's operating with just 1. What are the first things that you're going to do?
Okay, the first thing that I would ask for is, okay, under what conditions am I going to be operating? Obviously, we're going to have to do some things to remove some of the inmates from that situation. We're probably going to have to go into a lockdown, and I'm going to ask him, to author something quick to give me a guideline on that. That's obviously to cover my ass, because that's an important thing that you have to do when you're in corrections.
Hey, Russ, don't gloss over that. That was so spot on. Look, hey guys, look at the first question Russ asked. The moment there was a shift in coverage from 2 people to 1, the first question Russ asked on the floor was, is there going to be a modification to the operations today? That's what he asked. Are we doing reduced activity? What's going on? So yeah, that's very important. A lot of people may not ask that question.
Yeah, and and the reason that I point that out at the beginning is this: is you can justify changing a policy, and especially without all of those encumberments that I talked about with regards to laws, and that's cool. But none of that is ever going to relieve you from potential liability. So if you go into a situation like that and you change this and it changes your liability, you're in a whole nother ball of hurt with regards to the things that can happen. You can get sued by inmates, you can get sued by staff. And so taking some of those things into accountability when you're violating or deviating from a policy in that manner, you have to do some other things to cover your ass. You have to do some other things to try and reduce that liability and to mitigate it away, because you have no choice at that point but to operate under that lower staffing package.
And now, by the way, besides the request, you're also documenting the concern, correct? Correct, whether it's in a logbook or something. You're maybe doing a report. I mean, that would be great. After you're told, after you're given the directive saying, hey, you're working on your own today, that's fine. If that's what it is, let me write my report and submit that report, because there's a liability here. Like Russ said, this position is for two people, and right now you cut it down to one. So if something happens, I want to take note that, hey, we were only working with one today, and I made my supervisor aware I had concerns with that, but at that point, I was still ordered to go ahead and operate this post one man under. So Russ, would you think a report right after that and making sure that report gets submitted, get yourself a copy just so you can document in case anything happened?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of one of the great things if your facility operates with such a thing as email. It's very easy to use that. It creates a trail. It creates accountability. It allows you to, put that coverage over your butt to try and, stay even with things. I would think that as a supervisor, if I'm ordering you to do anything against policy, I'm going to be on the up and up and immediately give you that kind of coverage so that, I've got your back with regard to this. And this is just the way it has to be, because we've been put into this position where we simply don't have the resources to deal with it according to policy. So I know that there's some people out there that don't operate on that premise, but hopefully if they're not, you should be trying to get their job. You should be trying to promote upwards to take care of those things, to treat them like Anthony or I would.
Yeah, and the great thing that Russ said too, by the way, as a supervisor, is when the officer writes the report, you are going to be signing off somehow on the back end of that to kind of also note your concerns, saying, yeah, at this time we were one under. In order to maintain coverage on this post, the officer was assigned to the unit without a partner. Now, the other concern is, now, by the way, what we're saying right now, even though we're kind of using a scenario of being understaffed, you notice that we're going back to generally applying it. So I don't think there's many differences here. We're just using this as a specific scenario. But with that said, and I guess kind of drawn from the specific scenario, would it be in the officer's best interest to say no, that they're not going to work that post today the way it is?
I would say no. That's definitely a no-go. That's going to put you into insubordination. Obviously, you've refused to follow what ostensibly to me is a lawful order, even though it violates policy. Usually, there's enough, give and take on these things that person that's on scene at the moment in time does have the authority to go beyond that. Now, I'm not saying it's that way for every department or every institution, but generally there's some leeway there. There also has to be the kind of leeway there where that person that's taken upon them to go beyond that policy, that outside the bounds, so to speak, that they're also willing to, make shifts and adjustments in order to do what that policy is designed to do, which is keep people safe. So in that situation, what I mentioned earlier was, reducing the number of inmates, for instance, that might be out in that unit, maybe the number that are going to education or medical or whatever. There has to be some other option open to them.
Yeah, and guys, like some people get the word empathy and sympathy confused sometimes. Well, for here, don't get the word deviate and unethical confused, because the deviation of policy is something that you may have to, like Russ said, step up and document, but still continue. Where if it's unethical, no. If it's unethical, you have all the rights to say no and be comfortable with it and document. Just not going to do that. That's not within my prescribed role, like Russ said. But sometimes people may confuse that and they may say, I'm not doing this unethical order, and it's not an unethical order, right, Russ?
Yeah, that's going back to, again, having the knowledge and the breadth of knowledge to deal with things like this. Things that would be obviously unethical, violating someone's constitutional rights, violating a state law with regard to care and custody of inmates. If you were going to look at it from the constitutional edge, out on the streets, it would perhaps be illegal search and seizure. Inside, it would definitely be with regards to cruel and unusual punishment. So you have to be able to know what those things mean and be able to divine the difference, so to speak, between that unethical and just simply against policy, and where all those factors align or don't align.
Yeah, and guys, I don't care how many times you have to deviate from policy, always document it. Like, I know that, again, going back to understaffed, you go back to work the next day, same situation, go through the same route. Third day, go. But Gangi, it's never going to change. It doesn't matter. You don't want to make it forgotten. It's never going to change because you stop bringing it up. You still got to play the route as if it's the first time and document and forward it up, document and forward it up. And is it going to do anything? I don't know. But the point is, the moment you don't make the effort is the moment they're going to fall back and say, you didn't tell us nothing this day. You seem to be okay this day. So once you start that, continue to do it. Be persistent with that. One last thing, and then I think we could wrap it up, is I don't know if there's much of a gray area here. So if you have any questions or concerns of whether something's unethical or not, for me, I can't think of anything in my position that I would think is in the gray area. A deviation of policy to me is, I think, well, let's put it this way. I think you should, at this point, understand what's an unethical order. I mean, we could run scenarios all day, but at this point, if you don't know what an unethical order is, because let me tell you something, unethical is just like what Russ said, deals with human rights, stuff like that. So if you don't know what an unethical order is, then maybe you're in the wrong line of work. There's very little gray there, especially because your job really depends on you making that effort and knowing what an unethical order is. The deviation of policy, again, if there's still a correctional objective and this person's trying, like as a supervisor, I'm trying to reach this correctional objective, but I just can't get it, I'm going to may have to do some movement. As long as I'm able to justify it to reach that correctional objective, and I'm not breaking any violations in human rights or laws like Russ mentioned, we should be good to go. And then eventually we sit back at the table and revisit the failures of that policy. And guys, to be honest with you, if you're higher up in your management, because we have one more perspective here, is that you got to realize the stuff that you have in stone are never going to be 100%. So for the people that are coming into this profession and going right to management without ever working on the front line, when something happens and you notice that, well, there's a slight deviation here, don't jump the gun just yet. Just go talk to the people and find why, and then maybe something has to change. Because if you just judge the fact that, well, this person just went left without understanding and never working it, well, then the problem is, first off, the facility is going to remain stagnant. We're never going to grow. But second thing, you're going to get caught up in that hindsight bias Monday night quarterbacking, and you're going to wind up taking away the power of discretion from the supervisors who need that to solve a lot of our issues. Trust and believe. I know when emergency situations come, I don't see a supervisor saying, oh my God, let me go check the policy to see what I got to do. We don't have time for that. Sometimes we just have to make a decision and run with it. And then later on say, you know what, this is what I had to do, why I had to do it. And this is where policy just wasn't working for me. It just wasn't working for me at that time. Hey, Russ, any thoughts you'd like to have in closing?
Other than just, guys, be that advocate for the profession. really go that extra mile to, educate yourself about these things, about the differences between state law and case law, and what liberty interests are and what constitutional rights are, and then really delve into your own policy. You might be the one to point out where policy falls short. You might be the one to help write, policy and procedure for, a whole new way that really impacts the safety and security of your institution. So just, hold that, be mindful of what it is you're doing and why you're doing it.
And Russ, real quick, yeah, obviously you would have to agree with me. In the positions that we're in, we should be able to easily recognize what an unethical order is, correct?
Yes, you should be. This should be something that is cemented in you from the instant you're in the academy until the very last day of your career.
Yeah. All right, guys. So my closing, guys, just as always, guys, as always, on the way. I'm getting ready to end it. I have a closing thought I want to say. This was recommended by somebody. I think it was a great topic. Hopefully you guys got an understanding. We did use a specific scenario, but I believe generally it could be applied. I mean, the key here is be careful when you say no. Recognize the difference between unethical and a little bit of a deviation, and document. I know a lot of people are quick to say no, but sometimes you get stuff confused, and that no could lead you to get into some serious trouble. So, and again, supervisors do have that discretion. We laid that out right at the very beginning, so you're aware where the conversation is going. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. As always, guys, stay safe.